Oh, yeah, there you go.
Work session. I'm going to call the work session to order. I wish to recognize the board supervisor member Patty Cooper Jones participating this evening via remote telephone access as required by the Board of Supervisors electronic meeting policy and section 2.2-3708.2 of the Code of Virginia. Ms. Cooper Jones has provided notice that she would have to be physically absent from tonight's meeting for medical reasons. Ms. Patty Cooper Jones has requested remote participation in tonight's meeting from her home in Farmville, Virginia. Her request is in conformance with the board's electronic meeting policy and the requirements of Code of Virginia. Pending an objection from any of the members on board, Ms. Patty Cooper Jones will be approved and noted in the minutes of this meeting. Are there any objections?
No.
So moved. All right. Doug, what, we're going to roll right on with Joe and them.
Yes, sir.
You have anything to say first? Go to it.
And just, we've been working, our team has been working, really for the last couple of months on the application. And, the last time with the board, we said we get to a certain point, we want to come and give an update to the board. It's been a busy few months, and we have a lunch meeting today with, town manager, mayor, and crew, and we've got meeting scheduled coming up with Nottaway, and we're trying to keep things moving along. But with that, I'll turn things over to Joe Hines.
Joe, you're on.
Sounds good. I'll let Justin Curtis, we'll talk a lot, kind of give the first half update, and then I'll just
Okay.
after that.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good evening.
Good evening.
Thanks for having me back here again. Remember my jacket this time, so I'm going to go over it. It has been a busy couple of months. We've gone through, we hit a couple of milestones. I just want to cover those with you briefly, let you know where we are, and then give you, again, just to keep you apprised of what the next steps are, so nothing surprising is coming down the pipe. So in the last few months since we last spoke, it's probably better, hard to talk through a mask. So as we mentioned, when we last spoke, we had asked DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality, for a pre-application meeting. We had that meeting on November 18 of last year. It was hosted by DEQ. We had the whole alphabet soup of other agencies there, Department of Conservation and Recreation, VMRC, the U.S. Army Corps, et cetera. And the purpose of that meeting is for them to tell us, for us to give a presentation to all the agencies that we might need permits or approvals from, and give them the opportunity to tell us what they're looking for and what they need. So it's an important meeting. We had a very good discussion. We had very minimal comments back, which is good. Always what you want to hear. They also then had 60 days to go and think about it and come back and give any additional comments, requests that they might have. And what makes me a little bit nervous in these situations is that they come back and they say, we want X, Y, and Z additional conditions or requirements, usually to protect, fish or mussels or other environmental concerns. And they had a 60-day period at the end of January 19th. We got no comments. So, so far, so good from an agency review point of view. Pre-application public notice, one of the requirements was actually not a requirement, but a strong suggestion from DEQ, is that we publicly notice the project in the Farmville Herald. Did that twice in November. Had a 45-day public comment, no public comments. Again, that's also generally a good thing. In my experience, people don't write in to tell you they like what you're doing. They only write in to tell you they don't like what you're doing. So no comments is always good in my book. Pending legislation, of course, we're right in the middle of General Assembly session. We've been paying very close attention to, my firm in particular always pays close attention to all the bills that could affect localities, wastewater, stormwater, and sewer. Been a couple bills that could have materially affected what we're doing here, in particular a new public notice bill that would have made our lives a lot more difficult, would add a lot of time and cost. As of right now, it appears that bill is died in committee. So I think we dodged a bullet on that one. I expect it'll come back next year. It was administration. It was a bill from Governor Northam. But as of right now, that's good. And that would have put that would have caused us to accelerate our timing somewhat to get in before that bill took effect. So we are paying close attention to that. The last one I do want to, update I want to give you on what we've been doing in the past few months is, when we were last time here, we talked about a permit extension request to DEQ. So we discussed that at the meeting, and we did file that request to extend the deadline to file the permit application. So we got that in on time. DEQ did not approve our request. So, and their rationale for that was they didn't think there was any practical consequence for us as the applicant for them not approving it. So let me just, I want to put that in perspective since we did tell you we were gonna ask that last time and just let you know what that means. The good news is the downside really is just optical and messaging. From being involved in a lot of permitting situations, it's often more art than science, and optics matter. And so we're looking to have that extension granted. Really, the only practical effect is that at the end of the permit cycle, if we've got to still have a permit application pending come September 1st of this year, the existing permit will expire, and it's not going to carry over until the next permit's issued. However, I just want to make sure you're aware that it doesn't change the contents of the application, doesn't change the application fee you have to pay, it doesn't change the standards DEQ applies. It doesn't change their timeline for issuing the permit, and it is not going to change anything about the contents of the final permit, because every cycle they rewrite a brand new permit. So just want to make sure you're aware of that and put that in context and what the implications of that are. If there's anything, I think there might be an upside to that, as Joe is going to talk about here in a minute. So even with that request, we had a deadline, an internal deadline, if they granted it, of April 1st to get that application in the door. This is somewhat of an artificial deadline, and we were rushing to hit it. Now we've got a little more time to make sure we're going about and doing things right, and not putting something in that's not fully baked and fully considered. So that timeline is been extended a little bit further if we need it. Again, we're still shooting to get this done as fast as possible, but we have a little more time if we need it. So talk about what we're doing right now then. So that's what happened the last few months, what we're doing now. So just to reiterate, the last time I talked to y'all, talked about a couple different typical permitting challenges. What are the issues you run into with agencies and trying to get these permits? The first one, of course, is the environmental issues and environmental protection. And so far, based on our conversation with DEQ and the other agencies, we seem to be doing what they are expecting, and no issues have been raised. So far, so good there. Number two is, are there any other users, either immediately or downstream, that you're competing for water? They're going to pop out of the woodwork and try to minimize the amount of water you're withdrawing. Again, same issue. So far, so good. We haven't had anyone else raise any objections or any issues through public comment or the agency process so far. So we're good there. The last piece we're working on, this is always, it's a technical challenge, not a challenge, but something technically you've got to do, and it can be difficult to do, is putting together what we call the demand projection. So to get a permit for a certain amount of money, we've got to demonstrate the DEQ satisfaction that we're going to use the amount of water we're asking to withdraw. We've got to project that out a full 30 years in the application. So you've got to put together your best case for all of the users that are going to be using the water, and how much you think they're going to be using immediately and then going forward into the future. So that's the piece we're focused on primarily right now as far as putting the application together. So when we talked to DEQ at the pre-application meeting, one of the things they emphasized that they want to see in our application as part of that demand justification is they said they want to see a schedule of planned construction of a wastewater treatment plant, the intake, and a distribution system to move the water around. They said they want to see that there's a capital plan in place to actually fund that construction. And they want all of the end users, all of the customers that we're expecting to actually take the water, that all be identified clearly in the application, and then backed up factually with letters of support, et cetera, from the various users. So that's the piece we're really working on right now, and that's the piece that potentially could take more time, which is why I'm somewhat glad that we do have a little more time. So the last couple of months, I'm going to hand it over to Joe in just a second here. We've been working on garnering support for the project, engaging potential end users. I said this before, but reservoirs are a very valuable asset. I think if the folks are familiar with King William Reservoir, what happened there. It's really, really hard to build a reservoir, and I don't think we're going to see too many more built in this state. So the fact that you have one gives you a very valuable asset that you can use to build the basis of a regional water supply. So we're really trying to make the most use and market that asset to the region. So we're looking, and I think the pitch is what you have to offer is the possibility of developing a regional water supply that can benefit a lot of the smaller communities and areas that are growing. Oh, sorry.
Sir.
Yes. Oh, sorry, excuse me.
Our board member that's virtual,
Yeah, let me put this.
she couldn't hear through the,
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
is that good?
Yeah.
Oh, I think it's on mute, she can't. There you go.
All right. And of course, the objective when you're talking to folks, the objective is to look for that everybody wins situation. We've got a lot of smaller water systems, folks on groundwater systems, folks on private systems. And from having been through this process before, the message is not we're going to go in and try to take over your system and put your system out of business. The message is there a way we can collaborate to make this work out financially for you so that your water is less expensive for you and for your users? And then for us, of course, having more folks at the table spreads the cost of this around. And there's economies of scale. It makes things less expensive for everybody. So that's the message I think we're going out there with. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Joe here. He's going to tell you a little bit more about specifically who are the targets and who we've been talking to and give an update on that.
Thank you, Justin. Patty, can you hear us on the phone okay?
I can.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So, yes, thank you all very much. Justin, thank you for that update. So a couple things. One, y'all have contracted with Simmons to start putting a lot of the logistics of this application together. So I'll give you a quick update on that, and then I'll talk through the negotiations that we have with project partners going on. But we have, as Justin alluded to, we've already completed our DEQ pre-application meeting, which was the first task in our scope. We are working on the joint permit application preparation. We're probably about 50% complete on that at this point in time. Our next task was preliminary engineering design of the intake structure and concept plan for the water treatment plant. We're about 80% complete with that. And then we have environmental services where we go out and actually do wetland delineation on the proposed site, do some cultural resources work, some threatened and endangered species work, all the elements that we need to get in place in order to actually put the permit in, such a permit will be issued. We have roughly 25 figures that are going to be included in this application. We've completed a majority of those. We've completed field work for the wetlands delineation, and as Justin alluded to about the pre-application meeting. And as he talked about, we're actually looking at the water demands right now. So as Justin alluded to, that's kind of as much art as science, because you're trying to project demands 15 and 30 years out. You use the best guess methods, you use past population growth, you use future trends, you use what potential economic development prospects would need, and those all kind of go into the pot to come up with that justification for that permit withdrawal. So on that front, there are a couple of updates I want to provide you in terms of discussions with project partners. As Doug mentioned, we did have lunch with the town of Burkeville today, the mayor and the town manager, town of Crew today. They currently have an existing system in place, but they have some issues with Crystal Lake, which is their water source, and they have pretty significant costs to look at dredging and upgrading that system. They do currently provide water to the Nottoway Correctional Center, Piedmont Geriatric Hospital, and the VCBR facility as well too. And so, you know, they're that service provider, even though technically those agencies don't sit within the town of Crewe. They sit just outside the town of Crewe in Nottaway County. Nottaway County, we have reached out to them and proposed a draft resolution that would essentially allow us to, for state code requirement, and it's 15.2-2143, we have to coordinate with an adjoining locality if you're going to extend a system, municipal system into that locality to provide water service to their particular customers. So we have sent a draft resolution to Mr. John Prozice over at Nottaway County. We were on the agenda for February 18th. He sent me an email this afternoon asking for some additional information, including the board package. But right now, at this point in time, Doug and I are planning to go, and if there's any questions about process, Justin might attend with us as well, too. So we'll flesh it out for that particular meeting. It's also my understanding that they have an interest in looking at developing economic development opportunities in the western portion of their county, which is essentially at the 360-460 interchange, where you have James River Equipment. And so this could potentially serve Nottaway County's future economic development growth as well, too, and I'm sure we'll have those discussions with them also. The town of Burkeville is currently on well system. I think they're using, their 2020 average was around 33,000 gallons a day. They have a peaking factor of about 1.4, and I think their peak month was about 46,000 gallons per day. So they actually are going into their town council meeting tonight, but they are looking at that groundwater system. They recognize that's not the best long-term viable option for a municipal water system. So they have a draft resolution that they're going to consider tonight in support of the project, and basically showing their intent to go into serious negotiations with Prince Edward County about being included in that system. So the state and federal facilities in Nottaway County, as I mentioned, they're currently supplied by Crewe, but they do need an expanded supply, and I think that's been a little bit of an issue. There was a study done by Wiley and Wilson that was issued in December of 2019, where they had identified essentially 4 different sources for water. One was continue to do improvements to the town of Crewe system. One was to extend to Blackstone. I think the third was to develop an on-site well system. And then the fourth was to partner with Prince Edward County. Based upon some of their feedback at the time, there was a scoring matrix, which they downgraded Prince Edward on a couple items, which I think has obviously changed since we have a new county administrator in place. And so I think if we reevaluate that in the context of the dynamics that are in place today, Prince Edward could be the top option for them. But we're going to continue negotiations with them. We had actually, prior to going to work for Prince Edward County on this issue, we had actually put a proposal in to do the next phase work for them. We were called and selected for an interview. We notified them that we were working for Prince Edward County, so they asked us to withdraw from the interview for the potential conflict that might exist. But I know those interviews are taking place this week, and I anticipate within the next week or two they'll have their consultant on board, and we'll probably be back at the table having discussions with them about participating in the system. So the last item is essentially industrial and commercial development. How can you serve that? We obviously have a data center site. We're doing some additional research on the potential demands for data centers. I know Google in Mesa, Arizona has filed applications for a 1 million gallon a day demand immediately, long-term 4 million gallons a day for cooling water for their particular data center. So we're doing research on those different elements to make sure we can include that into the application as part of that justification. We just had a permit issued a couple of years ago for another client where I think we were able to justify significant economic development usage of water that was not currently in place today, but that was future development coming down the pike. So that we know that as far as data center is concerned, we know that the site is currently being marketed by both Dominion and Mid-Atlantic Broadband. They'll occasionally call us up for information, but in the highly confidential economic development world, especially when it comes to data centers, they aren't but so forthcoming with information other than just say, hey, we have passed it on to a certain class of particular industry or data center clients, and therefore, we feel like they're getting a lot of looks to the data center site. You might have seen recently where Microsoft bought up another 3 industrial parks in Mecklenburg County to expand their Boynton facility. One question had come back to me is, Joe, could they go to Prince Edward County for that? The way they're structured, they needed to be within essentially a 20-mile fiber run to their main data center. But if you land an industry like that or a prospect like that, that certainly can blossom and go out. So as I've mentioned before, data center usage is at an all-time high right now. Every time somebody takes a picture, every time somebody watches a movie, every time somebody does anything remotely close on that iPhone, that's getting stored and into a data center. Ironically, we were up at the Greenbrier this past weekend. They have the bunker, the old congressional bunker up there. We toured it yesterday before we came back, and they have actually turned that into a data center. CSX, who used to own the property when they had the contract with the government, has turned that into a data center. So everybody's looking for space for data center space. So hopefully, we'll be able to continue to capitalize on that potential opportunity for Prince Edward County. So with that, I'll let Justin wrap up the next steps, and then we'll answer any questions you might have.
There's very little in the way of next steps other than to answer questions. As Joe said, we've got, in the process of putting together that demand projection, and lining up users, that process is going to go up as long as it needs to take. We're going to have to bake that then into the application itself. And as Joe said, the technical elements of the application, and these things are, pretty thick. That's about halfway done. So that work is in progress and going. The goal has always been to file this as soon as we have it ready. So I think the goal right now is to try to get this done middle of the year. Again, assuming all of the discussions line up and we have everything we need to have a good, solid application and get an approval to build. We have until September 1st is when the our current permit expires. After September 1st, it's no longer a reapplication. So we're still trying. We have that fallback. We want to file before September 1st. Obviously, we want to file well in advance of that, but we do have that date as our fallback date. So with that, let's ask if the board has any questions for myself or for Joe.
I got a question. When we did the first looking into developing this as a water source, they did a study on the Lake C, how it was filling in, because when it was built, supposedly it was going to have a 100-year lifespan. And they found out pleasantly that it was not filling in anywhere close to as fast as they had predicted in the, before. And it's basically because the farmers are doing better practices to keep erosion and all. But would any type of study like that be done this time? Because it would look like you want to know how long we can count on this as a water source.
Yeah. So you had essentially a safe fuel analysis that was done the first go around, and there are a number of factors that factor into that. But that is one of them. I mean, you're correct that we have much better erosion and sediment control practices in place. Unlike Chesterfield County and the Lake of Wood Lake or Lake Chesson, which has significant development around it, y'all put an overlay protection plan in place, which actually should help that as well too. So they could come back and require. Now we got to keep in mind they might come back after we put the application and say, hey, you need to do a study on this, study on that, or study on this. But right now we don't anticipate having to do a study like that. But it doesn't mean they can't come back and say you need to. But I feel pretty certain that you don't see a lot of mud in the water. You don't see other related issues that would indicate that there's a fill-in problem
Right.
in this particular lake for this particular reservoir.
Hey, Joe, do you think we're gonna have the anticipated participation, collaboration from the other end users
Sure.
to meet the requirement? Or that'll meet the satisfaction of the permit?
Yeah, so the state takes a holistic approach to these permits, and I'm sure Justin can validate the fact that water is going to go to who has the immediate demand. So in terms of Nottoway, the prison is, DCBR is actually doing expansion right now, of which I think there are more than double their beds and close to double their staff out there. So, there is a pressing need for state facilities to have a reliable water source. Based on the information I've read, I'm not sure they're viewing Crew as a reliable water source because of the limitations on water source capacity. So timing is probably about right to be having those discussions, with them. We hope that everything will kind of fall into place to make it worthwhile for them to participate in the project. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to dollars and cents and being able to make it work from their perspective. Based on some of the preliminary numbers we've run, we feel like we're going to be in a reasonable range on the operational cost. given the type of plant that we're gonna have to, build, to send it to the 12-mile pipeline and get down to Burkeville and some state facilities. We anticipate it would be a one-day turnover in the pipeline, so from a technical perspective, you don't want water going to sale, you want it to usually be consumed within 7 days after you've treated it, or you could chemically boost it, putting the chlorine in or something like that. But it's not like we're gonna have 7 days worth of water sitting in the pipeline. That, at the current projections, that would be like a 1 day or 2 day turn at most. So they're getting fresh water if they get it directly from Prince Edward County at Sandy River Reservoir.
All right, sounds good.
Has a crew worked, how should I put this, worked through their overload of water? When I talked to them, a number of years ago and whatnot, they had just lost their biggest customer, which was the railroad. And they had some water problems in the quality, I think, of the water. But they didn't have any shortage of water.
Well, based upon their current demands and their current safe yield on the Crystal Lake, which is their water source, they're getting very close to maxing that out, even if the railroad is off as a customer now. Now, approximately 2/3 of that is state facilities. Okay, so you put 2 and 2 together on that front. But, when we met with them today, I mean, the reality is that if they're gonna have to spend $27 million to dredge Crystal Lake, and they can dredge a lower portion of it for a smaller amount, that number could significantly drop if they tie it into air system, and they can take that reservoir offline altogether, and maybe do a dry dredge versus wet dredge. If they join the system, they might not necessarily need to upgrade the water treatment plant. They could probably let that sit idle until they can afford to do it. So there are definitely some advantages to crew participating, but I think the biggest advantage is right now they have a water source. They have a water source issue that they need to solve, and this could be part of that solution for crew.
You mentioned Blackstone earlier, and I think back when we looked into this, Blackstone was mentioned by crew before, but they have to reserve so much water for Camp Pickett, I believe, Fort Pickett. And that kind of made theirs
Sure.
limited as far as what they could share.
Yeah, so it's my understanding that the Army used to run the water and wastewater treatment plant, and they would supply that service to town Blackstone. I believe when they transitioned Fort Pickett predominantly to Virginia National Guard, I don't know the exact history. Virginia National Guard took over the reservoir, but then they handed over the wastewater and water production plants to the town Blackstone. Okay, so it's my understanding they're looking at having to do some upgrades to those facilities right now. And I haven't seen the contract that exists between the Department of Defense and then Blackstone or anybody else, but, in times of national emergency, it's kind of a little bit of an all bets are off. So if they own the water source and there's municipal demand for it, the Department of Defense demand becomes top priority over that. Another way to look at, why this would be critical for maybe the state of crew is, you have a facility in operation that has to run 24/7. Just like, Mr. Davenport's facility, you have no option but to run that facility 24/7. You definitely need water, a lot of water and sewer source for that 24/7 time period. So, if they participate or the state participates, I think that really does help the application process, because you are a water source for a mission critical state facility. And then if for some reason Blackstone would decide to participate and we would ultimately extend the system to Blackstone, with FAST-C and the federal facilities that are being installed at Fort Pickett right now, that's another national security issue, another potential water source redundancy issue. So, I feel like, again, we have to make all the numbers work, but I certainly feel like my gut's telling me we can figure out a way to make it work. It's just we're going to have to go through all the steps and the justifications of these other political bodies.
In doing what you're talking about doing, you add on Nottaway, Burkeville data center versus what's flowing through that dam. Have we done the math to see what the drawdown would be to whether this lake can survive such as a year as 2001 when we had no water?
Sure. The last safe yield analysis that was done was based on the 2002 drought.
Right.
And I think they determined, I don't know the exact numbers, but it's maybe with about a 8 to 10 foot drop, you could still get an 8 million gallon a day safe yield out of the reservoir. So there are ways you can supplement that in the future too. And an example would be Cobb's Creek Reservoir that in Wright County, in Cumberland County, that's technically an offline reservoir. Okay, so what happens is there are really only certain periods of the year where we get really low flow, and that's usually sometime between June, July, and October. And you can look at stream gauges and see historically that's where it drops. We're pretty much high river flows for the remainder of the year, particularly this time of year. So what they would do is during high river flow situations, they would pump water out of the river and into the reservoir to fill the reservoir back up. I'm not sure if that's a possibility here, but that's certainly something we can take a look at is, you know, if you have a drought year where you do have to draw the reservoir down significantly, it's a possibility we can maybe build a pump station pipeline from Appomattox River, and then when the river flows back up again, we can pump water back into the reservoir to recharge it or fill it. More so.
Joe, I can add just one thing to that. The way DEQ is writing permits nowadays is there's a heavy focus on drought resiliency, as they call it. And so any permit they're writing today is going to have a number of conditions and requirements. When your water levels hit certain, when they start dropping, then other things kick in, water use restrictions, prohibitions on watering lawns, things like that. And they've gotten pretty smart and pretty good at figuring out ways to deal with these drought situations. The permit will take into account, like Joe said, that 2002 drought. And even so, when you get low and the water level still starts getting low, there's regulatory mechanisms that kick in to help try to protect the water supply as well as the users.
Any other questions?
Sounds good.
Joe, thank you all for the update.
Thank you.
Anything else from the board? Doug, is there anything else that we need?
No, I think we'll keep you, every week in my reports, I try to keep the board posted on progress, and, like I said, we've got a meeting coming up next week in Nottaway, and we'll keep you posted on the process and the progress of getting our partners on board with the project.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Any questions, be glad to shoot, we'll be glad to answer them.